Hey, this is Chris from Vintage Vibe. I have a little tech tip for you today about escapement. We have a 1971 piano here, and the escapement is too high. Before we settle in on a strike line, I want to rectify this escapement. So let's get into it and let's show you how to do it. One of the first things you'll notice on a piano with high escapement is the feel. It has a limited dynamic touch, meaning if you lay into the piano, it's going to sound great, it's going to bark. If you play lightly, it's going to miss notes. On a well-regulated piano, you want a piano that plays lightly and plays with effort. I'm going to show you the bass side and the treble side. If we start here on the treble side, we can see that the hammer is coming up in key rest position. It's about 3/16 to a 1/4 inch away from the bottom of the tine. Now, we're not going into aftertouch. If I push the key down into aftertouch, you can see how it gets closer, but that's not how we want to measure escapement. We want to go to the bottom of the natural key travel and measure the distance. And it's not so much physically measuring with a ruler, because that is a dimensional standard that we're not really going by. We're going by a feel of the piano, playability, and sound. So let's take a look at the other side. As I fully depress the key, you can see that the hammer tip lies about 3/8 to 5/16 underneath the tine. This particular escapement is a bit more than we'd like, so we're going to shave down the wood side supports and show you how to make a proper escapement. To ensure proper escapement and the height that you're actually going to end up with, you want to ensure that your voicing of your tines is actually in the ballpark of where it ultimately is going to be, meaning you do not want it too high or too low. So you want to pre-voice your piano before you finalize your escapement and make any cuts. So now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the piano from the case so we can get to the side supports easily. And first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove the screws underneath the key bed of the case. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove this. Now, this is an early piano, in 1971. Later models, you're going to find a screw that's anchored into the action rail. So if you have that, you'll have to remove that as well. Let's do the other side now. Same thing, there's 2 screws. And here we go, let's take this and cut it. So, what I'm doing here is I'm going to take off a layer of the top of the side support. You don't want to take off the bottom, you want to make sure you take off the top. Since we have about 3/16 to 1/8 to lose on the bass end, we're going to want to take off about a 1/2 blade's width to maybe possibly a full blade. Always start small, and you can always cut more. You can never cut less, although that's what shims are made for, so it's really not that big of a deal if you mess up a little bit. So just start with about a 1/2 blade's width and work your way up there. So let's turn this on and start it up. So that's the bass end. Now we're going to have to recalculate for the treble side. Let's try that. So we're going to reinstall the screws. So now that we have the harp on and the piano in the case, let's check our escapement. That's looking really good. And the bass is looking good. It might be slightly on the smaller decreased side than we're actually looking for. piano is extremely easy and dynamic to play, but we have some blocking going on. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to slightly increase the escapement. We're gonna start with the treble side and see if that rectifies this slight blocking we have here. Okay, we're gonna stick a shim underneath the harp right now. This is a 1/16 of an inch mahogany shim, and we're gonna just slide it right under there. Great, so that feels a lot better already. So one of the things you're gonna wanna do once you install a new shim is you're gonna wanna play each note up and down the piano hard and also soft to see how it reacts. On a hard strike, you're not gonna want it to choke and you're not gonna wanna hear a dead note. And on a soft note, you're gonna wanna hear a full tone with a nice dwell. So let's check out the bass now and see if it needs any shims. Here we are at the bass, and we're going to insert a new wood shim. This one again is a 1/16 inch mahogany hardwood. We're going to just give it a little bit of a lift. And once you insert the shim, you want to verify that it's breathing life into your action. You want to make sure that it's playing lightly and you can play the piano with a firm strike and it's still going to perform and react the way you want it to. So basically what I'm looking for now is that light touch which I was missing earlier. And I now have it. It's a lot lighter to the touch. And I can get it to bark. So once we have the shim in place and we are confident that our notes all up and down the piano play properly with a soft and hard strike, it's time to finalize and settle in on your strike line. So by pushing the harp forward or backwards while playing up and down the piano, like C's and F's up and down. For the video purposes, we don't have the time to actually settle in on the exact strike line, but I'll demonstrate what we do here once we have settled on a strike line. We take a piece of tape and we put it between the harp and the frame. And then we take a razor blade and we'll just score it. This way, when you go to make micro adjustments and you go back to settle in on your strike line with the bracket to the side supports, you'll know exactly where you left off at the optimal strike line. Now that we have the shims in place and I've given you a couple tips on how to adjust everything, another tip is what to listen for when you're settling in on that escapement. So if we take, for instance, soft and hard strike, and then we want to take our hand and lift the harp slightly. And what we're listening for is how the note breathes. Does it improve if I lift the harp up, or does it get worse? So this will ultimately tell you where your shims need to be. So let's listen. Okay, so what that tells me is that I can lift this harp up and maybe shim it a little bit more to get that top air, that breath that I'm looking for out of the note. So by lifting the harp and listening, you can tell whether you need to decrease or increase the escapement, okay? So that's a good tip. And one last tip of the day. Now that we've cut the side support and then finally added a small shim on top, the holes that were underneath the side support are covered up. But that's okay because we're probably not going to utilize those since we're changing the strike line. Once you've honed in on your strike line, like we discussed earlier, you're going to want to set new holes for the screws to secure the harp to the side supports. So you'll want to drill and reset. So that's a good tip.